Hello and a very good afternoon. My name is Abhilash and I am from the ADSolutions team here at ManageEngine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we get started, I'd like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and thank you for being a part of today's webinar. Before we get started with today's webinar, I would like to run a quick audio video check because I want to make sure that everybody out here today is able to see the screen well and is able to hear me well and clear. So let's start off with a quick video check, right? If you can see the screen well, if you can see the title, that's Hardening Password Security, my name and my email, please punch in yes via the chat box. Just punch in yes, just say okay via the chat box so I can confirm that the video is well and clear. Just waiting on a few confirmations before I jump into today's agenda. So if you can hear me well, if my audio is well and clear without any distortion, just punch in yes via the chat box, please. Just say yes, just say okay via the chat box so I can confirm that my audio is reaching you well and clear. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. Now, today's webinar's topic is hardening password security across hybrid Active Directory in 2020. Before we jump in, I'd like to tell you that all the source links are embedded within the slides themselves, and the slide deck would be emailed to you post the webinar. So if you've got any questions, please keep them coming in via the chat box that you see right in front of you, or you could always reach out to me on my email at abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. So hardening password security across hybrid Active Directory in 2020. Why did I choose to speak about this topic today? Passwords have been around for a very long time, right? That's not a secret. And passwords are the basic mode of authentication in organizations. But still, unsecure passwords were still a major factor for security breaches. 81% of security breaches, according to the latest Verizon's data breach investigations report, were due to unsecure and vulnerable passwords. Why are passwords still a problem? Right? We have heard of tips and tricks to strengthen passwords. For instance, you let your passwords be a minimum of 14 characters or a minimum of 18 characters. Use complex words in your password. Right? We've employed these tips and tricks, but unfortunately, our users don't follow them. We've heard security professionals, we've heard cybersecurity experts, we've heard system administrators around the globe preach about password security, but why do companies still deal with weak and vulnerable passwords? Custom applications in your organization, right? That has drastically increased the number of passwords in your organization because it's not just one password for your Active Directory anymore, but considering your hybrid environment, a user has to remember more than one password. Now, the latest approach is to completely kill off passwords or go passwordless. But the truth here is not every application supports passwordless authentication, and there is no denying the fact, the complexity and the expense involved to change the basic authentication mechanism, that is passwords. So that brings me to today's agenda. We will take a look at the state of passwords in 2019. This is 2020, right? And passwords, we've been using it for so many years now. Let's see what the state of passwords was in 2019 and see where exactly we are going wrong. Which brings me to my second point. We will take a look at 5 top reasons that I think why password security is still a major problem in organizations. And in the third part of today's webinar, I will be showing you a live security attack simulation. This is going to be a live breach and a replay attack. In the fourth part of today's webinar, we will take a look at the native solutions. We will take a look at the flaws and the problems in the native solutions and why passwords are still weak, right? Because there must be somewhere something is going wrong, right? And finally, we will take a look at ADSelfService Plus, and we will see how ADSelfService Plus can be leveraged to overcome all of these issues. So the state of passwords in 2019. The first 6 months of 2019, there were more than 3,800 publicly disclosed breaches, and that exposed about 4.1 billion compromised records. And Microsoft, upon research and a threat analysis research, like Microsoft calls it, found that 44 million accounts were still reusing passwords that were found in the breached credential databases. So what I mean to say here is that the breached passwords that were found in the first 6 months were being reused by organizations just in the first 3 months of 2019. Now, Immuniweb is a Switzerland-based company that analyzed places where stolen credentials are being traded. For example, the dark web. And they found that 21 million passwords belonged to Fortune 500 companies. And 95% of the credentials that were found were either directly in clear text or were cracked by attackers and hackers. And the truth here is that in 2019, breach and replay attacks were the most common, because it bets on the widespread habit of users reusing their passwords. So a single breach, a single mishap is all it takes for an attacker to gain complete access into your organization's internal network. Because one breach can give a hacker a password, and the password can potentially be replayed across multiple nodes in an organization's network to gain untethered access. So why is password security still a problem, right? Why is password security still an issue despite the attempts that we have put in, despite the multiple security measures that we've taken? Number one, following recommended password policies. Organizations often follow recommended password policies, right? Password policies that are recommended by security professionals or cybersecurity experts around the globe. You know, it's good to follow recommended password policies, but it's also important to remember that every organization has its own security need. Right? Password policies is not a one-size-fits-all mechanism. Right? You need to set up password policies. You need to set up policy controls in your organization based on your own organization security requirements. Every organization does not use the same weak passwords. Every organization does not need the same password length. Every organization does not need to follow the same password complexity rules. Longer passwords are stronger passwords. This is what we've been taught, right? Longer passwords are stronger passwords. While this is true, it's also important to remember that the longer our passwords are, the more complex our passwords are, it increases security, but at the same time, it also compromises on security. Now, the reason I say this is because if a password is too complex for a user to remember, he or she will note it down. He or she will stick the password on a post-it note. He or she will probably save it in a notes application on their mobile phones or a simple notepad file. The third problem is predictable password. Now, Immuniweb, like I said before, conducted a research and they found that 42% of passwords were linked to their own company names or their pet names or their family members, right? Or places people have lived. It's so easy these days. All you have to do is simply open up Facebook or any social media platform and you can find out everything personal about that user. And you can potentially use those personal things, places, pets, names of people as the password, and you have good chances that it may work. 42% was again the number that was found by Immuniweb. Security beyond passwords. It's high time that we do not depend on passwords alone. Right? Passwords are the first line of defense for an organization. Passwords are the baselines for security. right? But it's also important that we have security beyond passwords. Now, if you guessed what I was saying, I mean two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. But sadly, more than 45% of organizations do not have multi-factor authentication properly employed. And users find multi-factor authentication to be an irritating inconvenience. The last point is your passwords in custom applications. Like I said, it's just not Active Directory anymore. We do not have a single logon. We have multiple logons, and password strength has to be monitored across all of these logons. Now, time for the surprise part of the presentation. Now, I will be showing you a breach and a replay attack. Right? Now, the reason I do this is because I like to show things live. I believe that when a person sees something, the person would believe it further rather than opposed to just saying you would get breached. Let's go ahead and actually perform a breach, right? Let's see how easy it is to perform a breach. So let me quickly head into my VM right here, and you can see that this is my VM, all right? And let me show you something, right? This is a module called Domain Password Spray. Now, this module is capable of conducting a password spray attack on your organization's internal network. Right? All we have to do is use this module, which again, I've left a link to it within the slide, and it's freely available over the internet. And I have a list of users, right? Here you can see. How did I get this list? Because as an internal user, it's impossible for me to find out the usernames inside an organization, especially the administrators' names. Right? So this is how I got the list of usernames. So if I simply open up command prompt, right? And if I run a command called wmic get user account get name comma sid, right? And once I click enter, you can now see that I have all the users in my organization right in front of me and their respective SIDs. This is how easy it is for me to find out all usernames inside an organization's network. Right now, let's go ahead and find the members of, let's say, an administrators group. Right, so I will just punch in a command called net local group administrators. It's that simple. Here we are, all the members of the administrative group. Now I've taken the names of these members and I've saved them in the user list file right here. Now in order to perform the spray, I've taken a few commonly used passwords, predictable passwords such as QWERTY123, admin123, password123, and we can also specify weak passwords from a list that can be obtained online. For example, there is a password list called SecLists by Daniel Messier that you can find on GitHub, and you can use that list to potentially perform a password spray attack on your organization's network. This can be conducted as an internal test for you to check the strength of passwords within your organization. All right, so here we are. I have my passwords, I have my user. Let's go ahead and perform the attack. So I will quickly open up PowerShell. And before we get started, let me just prove to you something, right? If I punch in net user Ross, you can see that Ross is just a member of these groups and these groups alone. And Ross is not an administrator of any kind, just a regular authenticated domain user logging on to his domain join system, right? So let me quickly clear this. Let me shift to the desktop, and now let me punch in a command called PowerShell.exe-exec and then bypass. And once I click enter, you can see that it is executed, and the reason I'm running this command is because PowerShell by default does not let you run scripts. In this case, the domain password spray script that is not from a verified or an authenticated source. So running this command will enable an end user, I repeat, an end user with no privileges to run any attack or any malicious script whatsoever. All right, with that done, I will punch in a command called import module. So basically what I'm doing here is I am importing the domain password spray module. Right, and once that's done, I will run a command called invoke domain password spray. And let me go ahead and specify the user list that we have right here that we found by simply using command prompt. Right? So user list is going to be my user list.txt file, and my password list is going to be my pass.txt file. And once I click enter, you can see that the spray has started. And this spray is really intelligent, right? Now, the reason I say that is because there is a default 30-minute wait between sprays. Why is this so? So there is something called a logout threshold within an organization, right? So if there is multiple logon attempts on an account, the account would get locked out if the logon attempts are invalid, right? So in this case, the spray would happen only after 30 minutes. So the logout threshold potentially would be reset to 0 before another password is sprayed, right? So once I click yes, you can see that the spray has now started and we have already found a user with the vulnerable password. So this would be the end result, right? It would take about 1700 seconds for the spray to complete because there is a 30-minute wait between sprays. So we do not lock out any account and raise an alert within the organization. And this is what the end result would look like, right? We have found 2 users with vulnerable passwords right here. Now what would I do? I would take the password and I would play it across multiple nodes within the organization's network. So that's one compromise, and I can use such passwords and play it against multiple networks. Now I've used passwords such as QWERTY123 or admin at 123, but you could use your own set of weak passwords that you think are being used in your organization. For example, your organization name at 123. Right, so this is how easy it is for a non-privileged user to perform a breach attack and to use those credentials that were obtained and replay it across nodes within the organization to gain complete control. So how do we overcome this? Let's take a look at the native solutions that Microsoft offers us to overcome password issues or weak passwords within an organization. Right? And this is a hybrid Active Directory environment. So we need to take a look at the solutions across native Active Directory and across hybrid Active Directory as well. So hybrid Active Directory, what do we have? We have the password policies in hybrid Active Directory. So if I potentially head into my VM right here, right, let me quickly close this. And if I log in as the administrator, right? So I am now logging in as the admin. So that's administrator, keying in the administrator's password. And once I click yes, you can see that I've now logged in as the admin. And let me quickly open up the group policy management console. Right? So GPMC opens up the group policy management console. And let me show you something. If I head into default domain policy and click edit and head into computer configuration, policies, Windows settings, Windows settings, security settings, and account policies. Here we have our password policies. Right now, the reason I took you all the way in is because these 6 settings are being used from Windows 2000. That's right. This is 2020 and Server 2019 is out, but unfortunately, there hasn't been a single upgrade, a single change in any of these settings mentioned above. Right? So the problem with Active Directory's password policies is that password policies can only be applied universally. So you could potentially apply password policies on the domain node alone, and it would apply to all the users within your organization. Right now, Microsoft did hear our problems and they came up with something called fine-grained password policies or password settings object to be more precise. Now, fine-grained password policies can be applied to your users, to your groups, but not to your OU structure. So let's say you have your domain admin group that needs stronger password policies. Right? So you can apply a fine-grained password policy to the domain admin group. Let's say you have a marketing OU and a sales OU that needs stronger policies. Let's say you have a HR OU that has access to critical employee information and you want stronger policies. Right? This cannot work because the fine-grained password policies can only apply to users or groups and not directly to the OU structure of an organization. Now, fine-grained password policies or password settings object still depend on older password policies to create user passwords. That's right. These 6 settings that you see right here are still used to create passwords while using fine-grained password policies. Now, I can go on and on about the problems of Active Directory password policies, but the truth is, when something has been around for so long, people will eventually find a way around it, and that's exactly what happened with Active Directory's password policies. Coming to our custom applications, what do we have? Every application, every custom application, let's say Salesforce, let's say HackerRank, let's say Dropbox, let's say Google Suite, every application has its own set of password policies, right? Or password creation guidelines to be more precise. This confuses the administrator, I'm pretty sure, right? Because when an admin has to keep a check of password policies that are being used across multiple cloud applications, this only leads to confusion, and it also becomes very difficult and very impractical to keep a check on the password strength across multiple logons. This also frustrates the end user, and I'm sure that all of us have been through this. Right? We try to log into an application, we try to create a password, oops, password is not strong, please create another password. Now imagine this on a scale of 9 to 10 cloud applications that an individual user uses. When this happens, the user will get annoyed, the user will get frustrated and will simply set up weak passwords just to get away with the process. Right? So different password creation guidelines across cloud applications or custom applications confuse the admin because it becomes difficult to keep track and also frustrates the end user. This invites password-based attacks. Like I said, when a user is forced to create multiple passwords across multiple applications, the user cannot remember all of these passwords. So what does the user do? Create a password and reuse the password across multiple applications. Because the user can easily remember the passwords then. Right? And users like to feel empowered. Nobody wants to sit on a call or send out an email to the admin requesting for a password reset and waiting while their account gets unlocked. Why do they have to go through the entire process when they can simply reuse passwords, right? And multiple logons invites over-the-shoulder attacks. Now, over-the-shoulder, what do I mean by this? When a person is keying in a password once, right, he or she needs to ensure that no one is looking at them. Now, imagine the password keying in done across multiple cloud applications. Password policies across custom applications, they may not be stringent, right? We saw how easy it is to break Active Directory's password policy. We can use QWERTY at 123, password at 123, and get away with native Active Directory password policies, and it does not raise a single threat. Now, the same logic applies to your cloud applications as well, right? Who's to say that password at 123 will not be accepted at a custom application? It's very easy to bypass the password creation guidelines, and what we need is strong policies that ensure that weak passwords cannot be created, that users are not allowed to get away with weak user passwords. So how do we strengthen our passwords? Right? We've just been seeing problems all the while. We saw an attack, we saw the problems with native Active Directory's password policy and custom applications, but how do we work with it? We will employ a structured approach where first We will detect vulnerable passwords within an organization. That's right, we will find out which of our users are using weak passwords. That's step one. And then we will strengthen them with strong password policies. How do we detect weak passwords? This is a question, right? So we can use PowerShell to detect passwords, but before I jump into the process of detecting weak passwords during PowerShell, let me tell you that this involves a lot of coding and is a very tedious task to do, right? Because you potentially need to take a set of password hashes that you have, you need to convert them, plain text passwords, I'm sorry, that you have, you need to take the plain text password, convert them into NT hashes, take the password hashes from Active Directory, and you need to compare both of them and find out if they match, right? If they match, then the password in Active Directory is potentially a weak password. I'm sure this sounds complex when I talk about it. Just imagine how complex it would be when you actually perform it using PowerShell. So we have a tool called a weak password reporter tool. Now this tool is completely free to download. All you have to do is simply head into the source link and download the tool. So this is how the weak password users report tool works, right? So let me quickly open it up right here. And you can see now that I have my domain entered right here and my domain controller's name and an admin account. And once I click generate, all the weak users, right? All the users that have weak passwords are pushed out in the form of a report. Now, where are these passwords picked from? Right? So let me show you something. You can see something called password patterns.txt right here. Right? These are about a lakh of weak passwords that the weak password reporter tool uses. And it basically takes these passwords, automatically converts them into hashes, and takes the NT hashes from Active Directory and compares them to see if they match. Right? All of the process that had to be done via scripting is done automatically using this tool. And you can mention your own set of weak passwords here, or you can give in your own password pattern as well. So now that we know which of our users in our organizations have weak passwords, we can immediately force a password reset for all of these users. But then again, the age-old question comes again. How do I ensure that the user is using a strong passwords? I need to keep a check on this at all times, right? So that's when ADSelfService Plus comes in. So for those of you who are new to ADSelfService Plus, just a quick recap. ADSelfService Plus is an integrated self-service and a single sign-on solution. So your domain users can potentially reset, change, unlock their own accounts, that self-unlock or self-reset their own accounts, and self-update personal data without the administrator's intervention, but at the same time in a secure manner. Your domain users can have one-click access to all custom applications deployed within your organization. That's passwordless, one-click access. Your admins can ensure security during self-service activities and can ensure that strong passwords are being used with strong password policies. And your admins can synchronize passwords across custom applications as well. Right? This sounds like a lot of information, right? So let's break it down. Now that we know what our weak passwords are, the next step is to strengthen passwords. So ADSelfService Plus offers you password policies using which you can ensure that strong passwords can be used within your organization. Why are ADSelfService Plus's password policies better than what native Active Directory offers? Right? So ADSelfService Plus can enforce granular password policies. So that addresses the question that I posed earlier, where you could only have password policies on the domain node of your organization. But ADSelfService Plus can set granular policies based on an OU or a group or an individual user, and even based on a particular attribute. Right? So this is granular password policies. For instance, your domain admins and your standard users. Right? You might want a stronger password policy for your domain admins, and for your standard users, not so much. And ADSelfService Plus can help you solve this. Your password policy settings in ADSelfService Plus are in sync with today's cybersecurity requirements. That's right, not the age-old password policies anymore. These are policies that are in accordance with today's attacks, that are in accordance with today's needs. In short, password at 123 will not be allowed anymore. And you can enforce these password policies across native Active Directory as well. For instance, when an admin performs a password reset using the ADUC tool, or when a user changes a password, you can enforce these password policies. And the password policies are completely customizable and have multiple language support. Now, I would encourage you to check out this link that I've put here. So this link gives you an in-depth description of Active Directory's password policies, Azure AD password protection, that's Microsoft's latest attempt to ban weak passwords, and AD self-service Plus password policies. So go ahead, take a look and choose for yourself. So let's go ahead and strengthen passwords with AD self-service Plus. So if I quickly head into my browser here, you can see that this is AD self-service Plus, and let me head into configuration right here. Right, and under policy configuration, you can see that I have a few policies configured here. Let me quickly click on edit right here. So AD self-service Plus works on the basis of policies. All right, so this is how it would work, right? You can simply specify the OU that you want, the group that you want, or an individual user as well, and you can set up policies. And why do we need policies within AD Self-Service Plus? To set stronger password policies, to set customized password policies. And not just that, you can give away self-service activities as well. So that's the base of AD Self-Service Plus, right? You can set up policies for your users, and once a policy is set up, all you have to do now is simply head into Password Policy Enforcer, and here you can select a policy that you want. Let's say Pete right here, and once you check this, we are good to go. Take a look at these settings: minimum password length, right? Disallow palindrome passwords, disallow the use of a character more than 2 times consecutively, disallow use of characters from an older username or an older password, right? And disallow the use of these patterns. Here we have password at 123, and let's just add in QWERTY 123 as well. Now let me quickly show you something, right? If I head into my VM right here, I'm logged in as the administrator, and let me go ahead and reset a password for a user, let's say George. So I'm resetting a password for George. Let me go ahead and key in George's password. That's going to be password at 123, password at 123, and once I click OK, you can see that George's password will now be reset, right? I apologize for the delay because my Active Directory is not responding so well for some weird reason. All right, this should, let me quickly close this. All right, and let me quickly open up the ADUC tool again and show you what I mean. All right, so let's just proceed. Okay, here we are. Perfect. So let me go ahead and reset a password for, let's say, George right here. So that's going to be right click, reset password, password at 123. All right, password at 123, and once I click OK, you can see that the password for George has been changed. Let me go ahead and reset a password for George all the way again, right? So that's going to be password at 123 and password at 123, and you can see that the password has been changed again. Now the reason I'm showing you this little experiment is because passwords in Active Directory can be reused during reset, right? We can use weak passwords during reset, and those passwords can be reused for any user, and Active Directory does not raise a threat. So let me head into my OU right here, and let's go ahead and reset a password for Pete. Right, so this is going to be Pete's password reset. So that's going to be password at 123, password at 123, and once I click OK, you can now see that Active Directory has banned the usage of this password. How did that work? Because the native policies let you get away with password at 123, right? This is work because we have enforced the password policy right here for the OU where Pete is in, and we have enforced the policy from the native reset as well. Right? So when an ADUC password reset happens by the admin, or when a user attempts to change a password at the control or delete or at the genus screen, the password policy will kick in and the user will have to adhere to the rules specified here to create a password. I repeat, ADSelfService Plus works on the basis of policies, and password policies can be applied to the policies configured within ADSelfService Plus. And policies can be applied to your users, your groups, and your OUs, and the password policy works from native Active Directory as well. We have also settings like disallow the use of dictionary words. For instance, if I head into my notepad file right here, you can see that all of these are dictionary words, right, that are banned in ADSelfService Plus. This can help prevent dictionary attacks where you can specify your own set of dictionaries, or you could use the default dictionary as well. So that's strengthening passwords with ADSelfService Plus's password policy enforcer. All right. Now, here are a few more tips that you could employ to educate your end users. As an administrator, there are a few tips, standard tips that can be followed by all organizations, right? Use your keyboard as a palette to create shapes. Now, look at the keys in your keyboard, right? And look at the pattern specified here. Ensure that you follow a pattern on your keyboard, like a triangle or a rectangle, and you remember the pattern when you create your passwords. Adopt past phrases. For instance, the sun will rise again tomorrow, right? Pick a letter from each word and add in special characters and numbers, mix and match them, and create a strong passwords, but at the same time it's easy to remember. And ensure that you have strong password policies for your sensitive, your privileged accounts. For instance, your domain admins, your schema admin accounts. Always ensure that your users log the system or log off before they leave, and ensure no one watches your users when they enter their password. These are a few tips that you can give away to your users. And as an administrator, you can set an active or idle session limit for your end users, right? So if the session limit is crossed, the user is automatically logged off of their session in Active Directory. So that's detecting weak passwords, check, and we have strengthened passwords with ADSelfService Plus's password policies. What is the next step, right? We're good now, we have strong passwords, right? You can now reset passwords on the go as well, right? We have an ADSelfService Plus mobile application using which you can reset your own passwords and you can unlock your own accounts on the go as well. So that concludes the first part of the webinar. We've strengthened our passwords. What's the next part? Password attacks, unfortunately, can come in more than one form. If you can recollect what I said earlier, we need to ensure security beyond passwords, right? And we need to ensure that the user who's entering the strong passwords is indeed the authorized and the legitimate user. How do we ensure this? We have multi-factor authentication within ADSelfService. So this is how it would potentially work, right? Let me quickly show you an example right here that I just made up yesterday. Now, if I play this, check this out. I, Abhi, am logging in onto my domain join system. And now once I click enter, you can see that the ADSelfService Plus portal opens up where a push notification is sent to my mobile, right? And once I accept the push notification, I can log into my domain join system. So this is another mode of validation whenever a user logs on to his or her domain join system. Strengthening passwords plus another mode of validation to ensure user security. All right, and you have about 13 modes of authentication to choose from in ADSelfService Plus, so that satisfies everybody's need. And again, multi-factor authentication works on the basis of policies configured within ADSelfService Plus. Right? So a quick recap of what we saw just now. We saw the state of password-based attacks in 2019, and we broke it down into 5 major problems. And in order to further see how easy it is to perform an attack, we performed a breach using a domain password spray attack, and we could potentially take those passwords and reuse them across multiple nodes in an organization's network to break or enter further into an organization's internal network. So in order to solve these problems, we employed a step-by-step approach where first, using the weak password reporter tool, we detected all the weak passwords that are being used within the organization. And then, using ADSelfService Plus's password policies, we were able to configure strong password policies on the basis of OUs, groups, or individual users. And these policies also work from native Active Directory as well. And because using a password with today's cyber attack scenario is not sufficient, we employ two-factor authentication at logon. Now we have 13 two-factor authentication methods to choose from, where a user's identity can be double-checked before he or she logs on onto his domain join system. Now, are we done yet? Right? We're done, right? Just another step. We've secured AD logons for our users, right? We've ensured that strong passwords are used at Active Directory logons. But what happens to our hybrid environment? We've got custom applications in a hybrid environment, right? And we need to secure logons across non-AD authenticated applications such as Office 365 or Zoho or Salesforce. And finally, it is also important to take into account the user's comfort. Now imagine this scenario, right? Every time a user logs on to any application, he or she has to enter a password and undergo two-factor authentication. Imagine how much this would frustrate the end user, and this is the core reason why users find multi-factor authentication an irritating convenience. So we need to ensure security, but we also need to bridge the gap between security and user comfort or user convenience. How do we do that? Single sign-on with an ADSelfService Plus. So this is how it would work, right? A user keys in the password, undergoes two-factor authentication at native Active Directory logon. And once that is done, the user can then have seamless access to all custom applications and Active Directory resources. So that's just one-time password entering, one-time two-factor authentication, and that is it. Let me show you how this would work, right? If I head into ADSelfService Plus right here and head into password sync/single sign-on. Now you can see that if I check the drop down here, I have something called single sign-on applications, and there are about 110 applications for which I can configure single sign-on. And if you have a custom application within your organization, you can configure single sign-on for that application as well using the new custom app link right here. So let's just head into Office 365, right? And let me edit this. Check this out. So I have my policy right here. Now, just to reiterate, policies can be applied on your OUs, users, or groups. And I've selected the module, which is single sign-on, and I've specified my domain name right here, and that is it. Right? It's that simple. All you have to do is specify these settings, follow the instructions that are right here, and let me quickly show you how this works. Right? So if I head into my VM right here. Now, this is a VM where I've logged in as a user called Brad. Alright, now Brad has keyed in the password and has undergone two-factor authentication at Active Directory logon. Now let me quickly show you something. If Brad opens up the browser, right, and let's say Brad wants to access Office 365. So Brad just keys in office365.com, and now check this out. Brad wants to sign in, and once Brad clicks sign in, here's what happens, right? ADSelfService Plus authenticates Brad, right, automatically and gives Brad access to the Office 365 account. Why did Brad not have to enter a password another time? Because we've employed single sign-on and the authentication is done right at the Active Directory logon. Right? As an alternative, Brad can simply blow up the ADSelfService Plus application, and again, Brad is automatically logged in without having to key in the password to log into ADSelfService Plus. Now all Brad has to do is simply head into application and simply click the the application that Brad wishes to access, and that's it. So that's one-time password, one-time multi-factor authentication to double check the user's identity, and that's it. That's all your user needs to do. But we have now strengthened passwords across all logons by directing them to Active Directories logon, and we have also employed another mode of authentication at native AD logon. Right? So now we've bridged the confusion, we've bridged the gap between security and user comfort. So that's about it for today. Thank you so much for listening. But before we end it, I would like to push out a quick poll. Now you will see a question flash across your screen, and it would be really helpful if you could punch in the answers to the question. So I will be pushing out the first poll right now, and once I click launch, you will see the question come across your screen right now, and it would be really helpful if you can just punch in the answers to this. Just select one of the options that come across your screen, and that would help us a lot. That's great. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. All right. That's awesome. That's really cool. Now I would quickly close up this poll, and I would push in just another poll, just one more poll, and here you go. Just select an option that you wish. Thank you so much, guys. That is great. Thank you so much. So I would be here for the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if you've got any questions, please keep them coming in via chat, and I would be more than happy to help you out. And I hope you liked today's webinar. Thank you so much for being a part of this webinar, and I hope to see you for the next one. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day ahead.